Stop messing around, stop fooling around, stop delaying, stop procrastinating. Get up, get out, get it done. Everything is possible, nothing is a problem, and anything can be overcome. I just get my ass up out of bed, I get my shit together, and I get out and I start the fight. And that will transform you from a mere mortal into a superhuman being. I've never, ever, ever met anybody who told me that they got rich watching their IRA or their 401k.
Welcome back, Peter. Haven't seen you in a while.
George, you look amazing today.
Thank you so
Haircut,
much. Yeah.
clean shaven, normal clothes.
You know, it was time for a change.
Good for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. You know, I was going to England for a little while, so I just gotta, stay fresh.
You went to England.
Yeah,
And you're staying fresh.
Staying fresh as much as possible. Yeah. So, speaking of staying fresh, do you want to check out this reaction?
Let me see this video, please.
Yeah. Hello. I don't know if this is actually fresh. We'll see. But this is Kai Lenny.
Hi, Lenny. There he goes. He's towing in. Looks like he's at Nazare, Portugal. He's going to go into a mad one, right?
Yep.
100-footer, I'm guessing.
Which way? Left? Yeah.
Which way? Left? Holy shit. Oh, jeez. This, I feel like this is that skier going down that rock crevasse. Oh my God. Oh. Oh. Is he alive? Oh my gosh. Oh,
So intense.
yeah. Oh, I can't even watch that. Yeah, come get me before the next one lands on me. Wait, whose video? Oh, is that his? Where's the camera?
He's got it. He's holding it.
Oh shit. It's my worst nightmare. Is taking 1 or 2 or 3 on the head on a set. I'm supposed to be smart and make some like business or life connection here, but I can't. I'm too busy.
Just visceral.
Like my heart is coming through my rib cage.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to pause it there because he goes through 2 more sets.
Two more
sets, yeah. And
2 more
then
sets?
Like of the waves, and then the jet ski comes, picks him up. But yeah, insane. Yeah,
So
wild.
a wave 6 feet tall that hits you on the head in most normal circumstances is a lot of water, and most people can't deal with a 6-footer.
Yeah.
This wave is 50, 80, 90, 100 feet.
Yeah.
And all that water's hitting you on the head. After the wave breaks, the white water itself is 50, 80 feet.
Yeah.
I've been there. I mean, I haven't been there to Portugal in that wave, but I've been in that situation where just a lot of water comes down on your head, and it is not a good thing. Yeah. At my peak physical conditioning and being in shape, I was in maybe a 22 footer.
That's huge, though.
And I almost died.
Yeah.
I almost died because...
Where was that, Hawaii?
That was at a place called Ponga Drops in Nicaragua, which was a couple of beaches down from where we were staying. And this place was known for being a magnifying glass, similar to Nazare, Portugal.
Yeah.
It was just a magnifying glass. When the wave energy would come in, it would just jack up and get huge, way bigger than anything else surrounding it. I mean, the other waves were breaking like 10 feet, 12 feet. This was breaking like 22 feet.
Holy shit.
And we pulled in on a boat, and so as opposed to paddling out through the waves from the shore, we pulled in on the back of the waves from a boat, and we just swam into the lineup, so there was no context or understanding of wave height yet. So you had to go and drop in order to gain the understanding of how big the wave was going to be. And I dropped in, and it was big, and it was like, I kept looking, I'm like, oh, and it was like going right over me. And I actually made the wave, and I kicked out, and I started to paddle back, but Papa Bear was the next one that was coming, and that took me out.
Yeah.
It took me out, and then, I got Baby Bear. Mama Bear was after Papa, and then the Uncle Harry and Aunt Susan, and I took like 3 or 4 on the head. My board ripped off my foot, the leash broke, went to shore. I'm sitting there with no flotation. It's bad. When you get caught inside like that, and you're taking those big waves on the head, it's pretty bad. You have to be really equipped to deal with that. You have to be really equipped to deal with anything. Kai Lenny has to be equipped to deal with taking 3 or 4 waves on the head, the biggest wave in the world, and he's sitting there waiting for his rescue jet ski. It's not coming. So what's he gonna do? I mean, it's up to him. Yeah. He's got to dive under, come back up, get some air, whatever. But he's got to deal with. He's like tumbling around like a washcloth in a laundry machine. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's parallel to life. I think people have situations that hit them. They're unexpected and they're of large magnitude, and they come randomly when you're not expecting them. You have to know what to do. You have to be prepared for that shit. Like SEAL Team 6, you got to be prepared for any scenario. Anything can go wrong at any time, and you have to have the confidence, the mindset, the willpower, and the physical and mental tools to just deal with it. Anybody who's successful, anybody who's overcome anything knows what it's like to be stranded inside taking big waves on the head.
All right, and then our second reaction, our last reaction for today, is from Sean Sweeney.
Sean Sweeney.
He says,
is this one of our followers?
This is not one of our followers, at least not that I know of. But this is just one of those guys.
Can you DM him and ask him to be a follower?
100%. I'll do that right now. But yeah, real estate Twitter. One of the guys that talks a lot on there.
Sean says, if your investment decisions are based on the current headlines of the day, you've missed the best opportunities. You really have to push that aside and think, how does a war, inflation, et cetera, truly affect the opportunity that I'm looking at? Sometimes it makes it even more attractive. Yeah. The definition of crisis in Chinese is danger and opportunity together. And I think that what I hear Sean saying is like, hey, if there's inflation or a war, it's not all bad. There's probably opportunity in that. He's 100% right. The normal breeds normal. It's the unique situations, the black swan events, the 100-year storms that come along and create opportunities and situations in our society that aren't normal, and that's when we have to step up and take advantage. Are we going to sit there like a sitting duck and just get, rained on, or are we going to pivot, move, do something, and take advantage of what's happening? Me, I'm pretty good at pivoting and taking advantage. I think my friend Sean here is saying you got to do that as well. I'd like to hear how he's done that. So the war in Ukraine means food supply shortages, oil and energy price changes. It means humanitarian and refugee issues. There's a migration of millions of people across Europe now. Hasn't happened in a half a century. So there's all sorts of things that are happening now that haven't happened in decades, years and years and years, but they're happening now. What are we going to do about it? George, what are you going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? I am going to figure out ways to move and navigate the waters that are uncharted here. I mean, war, inflation, political environment, economic environment. We haven't seen the inputs and the situation that we have in front of us right now. We've never seen it in our lifetime. We've never seen it. Yeah. I'm not going to sit around on my ass and do nothing. I have to take action. Yeah. And I'm going to be deciding it multiple times at every day, at every new moment, what those actions are going to be. I have to be ready and I got to move. And so do you, and Sean Sweeney, so do you.
Yeah, I love it. All right, sounds good. We'll head to the table.
Let's go to the table. Thanks, George.
Thank you. How the hell are you, Peter?
George, I'm all right. I'm the hell good. I mean, I'm not the person that was just away for 2 weeks. You were away for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You international jet setter, you.
Yeah, I'm trying to be. Thanks for having me back, though. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming back. In this day and age where it's the great resignation, I thank you for coming back.
Yeah, you're very welcome. No, I'm lucky to come back. Yeah. I guess to get started, I want to talk about prioritization density, and I don't mean getting fat on vacation.
Okay.
I mean Biden's new housing plan. We've talked about this a little bit.
Please, what is your... I'm really glad you brought this up. What is it you'd like to talk about or ask? Because I am pretty well versed on our president's unveiling of his new housing policy, and I'm really psyched for it. Yeah. But please, go ahead.
No, I think I'm just surprised that this is a lot of focus on something that we've talked about for a long time.
Forever.
Yeah, forever.
I've been talking about it my whole life.
Seriously.
People are coming out of the woodwork and making these comments. They're like lobbing these zingers.
Yeah. Right?
Like they've been studying it and are experts on it for decades. And anyway, I'm thrilled. Whatever. Yeah. It doesn't matter to me. I'm thrilled that we're talking about these things. Yeah. And I hope that our towns and cities and states are going to join the conversation in a meaningful way. Yeah. But what did you notice about it?
This White House has not necessarily been super popular amongst businesses, amongst real estate, that this is a very in line with kind of what we've talked about of more supply.
So here's how I see it. It's a Democratic president.
Yeah.
It's a largely Democratic administration that's in there right now.
Yeah.
Typically, they're not pro-business, pro-real estate, pro-economic drivers, typically. They're more regulation, they're more restrictive policies, they're more regulatory policies, typically, right? I mean, that's how that usually falls.
Yeah, historically. Yeah.
What we're seeing is that President Joe Biden unveiled his housing policy. George, the whole thing focused on two things. It focused on creating more supply. He identified correctly that we have a housing supply shortage, which is causing prices of housing of all types to go up. Introduce more supply, curb the pricing. That's the first thing he identified. The second thing he identified is we have to look at our zoning and our housing policies, and we have to upzone, we have to loosen restrictions, we have to create incentives, we have to come up with financial programs and incentives to get developers and entrepreneurs into our towns and cities to take risk to build.
Right.
Those two things,
Yeah.
build more supply and address your housing policies that are too restrictive.
Yeah.
My mind was, George, my mind was blown.
Yeah, no, I know. I imagine.
I can't, and I applaud our president for making his housing policy focused on these two critical points, as opposed to we need to price control, we need to regulate. George, we've talked about how Canada is restricting foreigners from buying real estate. We've talked about how cities all over our country are enacting rent control and rent restriction policies.
It's a trendy thing to do.
I mean, all of it is brainless and has the exact opposite effect of what these legislators are hoping for it to have, but they don't know better. Here's our president with a team of economists, with a team of scientists, with a team of advisors and cabinet members, and like the best, most accomplished resources in the world, all advising him. What does he do? He says two things are going to solve our housing problem. Number one, build more supply. Number two, address zoning and housing policies, loosen them up, and incentivize the engine and lubricate it.
Yeah.
Can't believe it. I'm thrilled, and I applaud. I applaud you, Mr. Biden.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, it's fantastic. The first thing I did when I saw this was I sent a letter to all of my town and city councils in my markets that have very restrictive housing policies. Georgia, New Jersey, we have those towns.
Yeah, standard.
So I sent a letter to all of them saying, look, I don't know if you guys saw this, but our president is even saying two things and two things only: build more supply and address your policies and loosen restrictions. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that our town leaders and our local leaders see this, because I think that a lot of them will be inspired by and moved by what our president's doing. At least they should be. You can't regulate your way out of a supply shortage. You can't regulate your way out of a housing crisis. You can only do two things. You can introduce more supply and stabilize or reduce pricing, and you can loosen up restrictive policies, make it easier and more inviting for entrepreneurs to take risk and build to solve your problem, Mr. and Mrs. Public Sector government people, that you can't solve. Incentivize the private sector to come in and do it. Those are the only two things you can do. Biden's saying it. I'm saying it. When are you guys going to hop on the train? George, I'm thrilled. Thank you for bringing it up.
You're talking about loosening restrictions, and I promised myself that we weren't going to talk about rent control this episode, but it just never.
Well, go ahead, hit me with it, because it's prevalent everywhere
now.
Yes,
I mean, New York City Rent Guidelines Board voted to raise rent for the first time in a long time, and it basically. I feel like no one is happy. Like the landlord representatives say it's not high enough, and it's not going to keep up with inflation. Yeah. The tenant advocates obviously don't want any raising of
standard
rent.
Rhetoric, but go on.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, where do you stand on that? Do you
so
feel
every year, the Rent Guidelines Board meets to propose what the annual increases are going to be in New York City for rent stabilized leases for a 1-year renewal and a 2-year renewal. This year, they voted to raise them between 2% and 4% for a 1-year renewal and 4% and 6% for 2-year renewal.
Yep.
And, the past couple of years, it was like 0.
Right. Yeah.
And every year, no matter what the numbers are, if it's 0, the tenant advocates are going to say, it's too much, we want it rolled back, we want rent reductions. If it's 20% increases, the property owners are going to say, it's too little, we need more. Like, it's New York City, everything's too expensive. Totally. So there's always that peanut gallery of voices chiming in everywhere, like, it's too much, it's too little, it's too much, it's too little. But what you get now is an interesting dialogue, because we're on the heels of this incredible historic inflation that we're in right now, our economic environment. And you've got all of these tenants who didn't pay rent that eviction moratoriums, and property owners really took it on the chin for the past 2 years. Let's be honest, they did.
100%.
And not that it wasn't a tough time for everybody, but in the context of rent increases and property ownership, property owners really took it on the chin in New York City.
Yeah.
So, where do I stand on it? I think you have to at least mark the increases to CPI. At least. So even with a 4 to 6% increase on a 2-year renewal, George, and that's locking in for 2-year lease and getting the same rent for 2 years. That's what a 2-year renewal is. You don't get months 1 to 12 at one rate and then months 13 to 24 in the second year, another rate. It's all the same rate for months 1 to 24 in the renewal period. It's not great for property owners. It's not a great environment to be a property owner in the business of providing housing in New York City if you own these stabilized and controlled buildings. There's over 1 million controlled and stabilized apartments in New York City. So if the average building is like 20 units, do the math. It's a lot. Several hundred buildings that we're talking about in New York City. They're impacted by this. Whether it's New York City, whether it's your town, whether it's my town, our town leaders, our elected officials have to enact policy that's sensible, that addresses the bulk of the constituency who lives in the city, but that's economically and scientifically viable and proven. You can't just regulate your way. Oh, this sounds familiar. You can't just regulate your way into affordability.
Right.
You have to build more supply or create more supply. The more restrictive your housing policies are, the less vacancies and the less inventory there's going to be. It's only going to make housing that much less attainable. It's going to make it that much less affordable. So while it's great that this year they're talking about somewhere between a 2 and a 4% increase for a 1-year renewal and a 4 to 6% increase for a 2-year renewal, and that's great because it's more than it was last year. So I applaud them for making it more than it was last year. But it's got to be more than a step in the right direction. It's got to at least map to CPI, because what's happening? Wages are also going up. Now, I know they're not going up for everybody, right? I'm not saying 100% of the people on the planet have increased wages. Yeah. But again, for the bulk of the constituency. So the bulk of the constituency who's living in rent-regulated or rent-controlled apartments in New York City is probably seeing their wages go up. So it only makes sense to map rent increases to CPI, which are mapping to wages. It's all got to be in line. Otherwise, you're interfering with free markets. George, I'm a free market advocate. I'm a free market guy. You have to let the free markets play out. Regulating free market behaviors only damages the consumer. I'd love to see New York City not operate in its current form, where the Rent Guidelines Board proposes these increases, then they vote on it.
Right, this hasn't even gone through.
Right, they vote on it in June.
Yep.
This is just the proposal of the range of increases.
Totally.
But I'd like to see the whole thing work differently, where it just maps to CPI, or it maps to some other index. But to have a board of people vote on it, and there's lobbying, and then there's the political machine involved, and it's just wrong. It's the wrong way to do it. Yeah. Let the free markets behave in a free market manner. That's the best way. New York City and everywhere else, upzone, increase your densities. Do it smartly. Do it with technical proficiency. Do it with a design aesthetic. Yeah. But do it. You got to motivate the introduction of new supply into your marketplace. Let's get rid of the Rent Guidelines Board. Let's get rid of all these. In New York City, George, is there's a lot of different agencies that touch and oversee housing. You've got HPD, Rent Guidelines Board, DHCR, all these different bodies that are supposed to be in charge of different aspects of the metric zone and the housing market. And just get rid of all of them and have one clear, sensible policy that addresses what rents can be increased to, what it maps to, and what it's correlated to.
Cut through the red tape. Yeah.
Please. Yeah. Otherwise, it's so much red tape, man, and it doesn't do anybody any good. It doesn't do the consumer any good. All of this should be for the consumer's benefit. It's not. It's for the politicians' benefit, because they'll get votes if they enact rent policies that are restrictive, or it's for the other politicians' benefit because they're going to have the real estate guys up their ass and they'll donate to them, and so they'll have a well-funded campaign. Get rid of all of that. It shouldn't be good for anybody who's a politician. It should be only good for the consumer. The consumer benefits from a free market environment. Politicians, leaders out there, make decisions that are good for the consumer. Unrestrict your markets, loosen up your policies and your legislations, and let things be as free market as possible. That's the best thing for the consumer.
Bloomberg reported recently that over 50% of, I think it was millennials and Gen Zers, would accept cash and to kind of help pay off their mortgage. They'd basically have roommates, join forces with other people to do that.
Bloomberg wrote about this?
Yeah.
Groundbreaking journalism there, Bloomberg.
It's not nothing new, but do you see this as a viable solution for those people that are just like, not people that are looking to get into real estate, but people that are looking to help with the cost of mortgages?
Necessity is the mother of invention. People will do whatever it takes to get by, to win, to succeed, to thrive. If the environment that we're in right now is too expensive, it's too prohibitive, it's too much of a far reach to obtain home ownership, and you have to rent a house or you have to buy a house but you can't afford it, then what do? Oh, I'm going to rent out rooms. House hacking. We've been talking about house hacking for years. Not a new thing. If that's what people need to do, that's what people are going to do, and they're doing it. That's your point. I applaud them for doing it. They're learning how to run the economic machine of owning or controlling real estate and providing housing for others. So that's an important feature of our society that they're learning how to do.
Yeah.
And they're winning.
Yeah.
They're winning. They're living in the master bedroom and they're renting out the other bedrooms for whatever, and they're paying the bills with that. And they're providing a service, they're providing housing, and I'm sure their roommates and tenants who are paying them are happy to have a great place to live. I assume it's a great place to live. Let's just, for this example, I'm sure they're happy to have a place to live.
Yeah, I guess I was curious if you thought if these people are doing it mainly just to decrease their mortgage or help with their mortgage.
Well, if
they're
doing,
going to be overwhelmed by this kind of new set of tasks,
they could be doing it to decrease their monthly nut. Yeah. They could be doing it to make money.
Right. Yeah.
Which is okay too.
Yeah. Cash flow. That's what.
Yeah. Whatever. Whatever the reason that they're doing it, they're doing it either out of necessity or by choice because they can't afford it otherwise. Whatever. But I think it's a good thing. It's impossible for people to find apartments or dorm housing or traditional forms of living. So these alternate methods are taking hold, and young people are doing it. I applaud them. The trick is to get really good at it and become successful at it so that one day you don't have to rent out your home to a bunch of other friends because you'll age out of that, just from a mentality standpoint, perhaps. But, look, whatever it takes, when you're young and you're starting off, whatever it takes, you got to do whatever it takes. You got to rent out rooms. Now,
I forget, when you started, you said that sixth family. Were you part of that sixth family? Were you in that?
I lived in one. Right. I rented out the other five.
Yeah, so that's how you started as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And I did that for a couple of years. And when I moved out of the area, I sold the building, made a couple of bucks and moved on. Yeah. But I learned how to, respond to tenant. I lived in the building. They knew it was me who owned it. I had to fix things and say, yeah, I'll get right to it. And when they didn't pay on time, I had to say, yeah, where's the rent?
Right. Yeah.
And I had to learn to be comfortable with all that. I mean, I was a kid, so I wasn't experienced yet. But you get comfortable with that stuff really quickly when you have to do it. Like either you do it or it doesn't get done and you miss a payment and you go into foreclosure. So it's like you learn how to do that stuff by necessity.
So some headlines do their job. This one caught my eye. 8 parking spaces for every car. That's the headline that was in.
8 parking spaces where?
In the U.S. That Fast Company claims that there are 8 parking spaces for every car in the U.S.
How do they know that, George?
I don't know,
Did they measure that? Did they send an army of people to every state and measure every parking lot?
Yeah, I think that's what makes it a good headline, but not necessarily an accurate
headline. I hate these douchey headlines. So they're saying there's 8 parking spaces for every car.
Yeah.
And therefore what?
Yeah, essentially they were saying that, this space has been misused in many, many cities.
Oh, there's too much. Oh, you're talking about a housing shortage and how do you build more supply and use.
Yes,
use.
Exactly.
Is that the context here?
That is the context here.
Well, let me tell you, first of all, I think it's a ridiculous headline, but let's just go with it for a second. It's probably case by case basis because I can think of many markets where there's not 8 parking spaces for every car. I don't know, New York, New Jersey, like where we live. Right. It's not the case. Like parking's at a premium. Yeah. But I can imagine that in our favorite place, Sheboygan, Wisconsin, certain that it's got more than 8 spaces per car. And in Missouri and in Kansas.
I think Buffalo is the one that they were talking about a lot in the article. Yeah.
The mere fact that there's even a headline in a publication, Fast Company, means that more and more people are talking about this. Yeah. Where do we find land? We have to find new uses for land. Oh, this sounds familiar. Have we spoken about this?
I think so.
10 times?
Sounds familiar.
There needs to be new uses for the land that we have. We can't just do the same thing over and over again and expect a new result. We have to change zoning. We have to upzone. We have to look at our land use, our master plans. All of that has to get reviewed. If there's land, we have to build housing. We need parking, of course.
Yeah.
I don't think the article, or I didn't read the article, but I can't imagine the article would be saying that parking is not as important as housing. I mean, you need both.
Yeah, I think they were just saying, specifically in Buffalo, when this example they were giving was that zoning laws kind of force you to make a lot of parking spaces, no matter what kind of building you're building.
Well, that was the objective for years.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to approve it unless you give parking.
Yeah.
Like that was always what these zoning boards did.
Yeah.
Like,
so there's just a lot of excess parking now.
yeah.
in
Well,
this area.
I think every town and municipality is its own local place and has its own unique set of issues, and they have to be addressed. So if you need parking, you got to create parking. If you need housing, you got to create housing. If you need, I don't know, food and water, you have to get an increase of supply of food and water. Like, whatever your needs are, address those specific needs. In our area, parking's at a premium. We need a lot of parking as well as a lot of housing. But, there's definitely places that have underutilized land, whether it's parking lots in this case, or whether it's other types of land uses where parcels are just sitting there undeveloped. They're not generating any ratables or revenue for the town. It's like a total waste. Like, incentivize these things to get used and developed and to their highest and best. Like, allow them an environment where they can flourish and fulfill their highest and best use. So if it's a parking lot or whatever else it may be, we got to look at all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I applaud Fast Company for writing an article that forces the conversation, but I don't know about that headline.
Better headlines in the future.
There's 8. Give me the headline again.
8 parking spaces for every car. Yeah.
I don't know who would write that, but
Hollywood hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're probably, either they're from Buffalo, because, Buffalo has nothing happening up there. It's a government town.
Yeah.
Or they're from West Shkapatapank, New York, and they drive into Buffalo and they're in like Shkapatapank kill, fish kill, fish Shkapatapank.
But it goes back to that thing you said before. If zoning is preventing housing supply, then you have to adjust that zoning.
All the laws on our books are from a billion years ago.
Yeah.
Zoning laws, criminal law. My favorite are the ones like, what's the town in Georgia? They require you to own a gun.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And there's another one that says no tying up your donkey on Tuesdays between 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Take that shit off the books.
Right.
Like, well, we can't because it's been there for 400 years, so we couldn't dare take it off the books. Take it off the books. It's 2022. It's a different world now. Come on, people. Like, what? Like, be leaders. Totally. Create policy that's relevant for today.
Yeah.
What does everybody do? They go, oh, well, that's what they did. That's what they did. That's what we did. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. It's easier that way.
It's easier that way. People are so unqualified. My hope and dream is that our brightest and best will want to seek public office and run and put themselves through that.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen because they get beaten up and bloodied and dragged through the mud, and their families get smeared, and they're, like who would want that? Like, I don't blame people for not wanting that, but like, we lived in a world where that stuff could not happen and you could actually run for public office based on your skill set and your qualifications. We get a lot better pool of people running. Right now we have just like, I don't know, man. It's more popularity contest, and it's.
Well, this is something you. Speaking of public office, you sent this to me like a couple days ago about the NFTs, the politicians or hopeful politicians raising money.
I love this.
Selling NFTs.
I love it.
Wild.
So first of all, politicians at the end of the day still suck on the teat of the economic engine. Yeah. They still do, right? Despite all their claims to not be associated with or beholden to money or donors or lobbyists or the economic engine. Despite all those claims, they all are beholden and they're all sucking on the teat and they all need the money. So they're talking about doing fundraising for their campaigns using NFTs, and they're selling NFTs to the campaign donors. And I thought it was, first of all, I applaud it. I think it's a great idea. Like, I'm one that recognizes that anybody who's running for office, you need to fund a campaign, so you need the money. So, but I love that they're embracing new technology and selling NFTs. Now, I don't think they're selling NFTs like, Bored Apes, and then it's going to go to
right.
$800,000 and you'll make money.
Yeah.
I think they're doing it probably like a campaign button or like a flag or a T-shirt or something like that. Like, I think it's the equivalent.
Yeah.
I don't think they're. It's more like a memento.
Yeah, they also can't sell them for, it's like a capped at like 5,000 or something like that.
Okay, so there you go.
Yeah, like it's legally.
But I think conceptually it's great that people who are seeking public office are embracing this technology. I think there's going to be all sorts of uses for NFTs, not just the ones we've spoken about for intellectual property and contractual issues. But here you go. You've got people seeking public office looking to give NFTs to their donors.
Yeah,
I think it's cool.
The thing that's interesting to me, and they didn't say anything about this in the Wall Street Journal, but the utility of NFTs is something that I could definitely see politicians using in the future. And what I mean by that is like, when a lot of artists are using NFTs where you buy it, and then you also use it as like a pass, or like it gives you some kind of
access.
benefit. Yeah, it's like either a ticket or something along those lines. And you could definitely see that being an aspect of political life in the future. Where you're like, oh, you buy an NFT, now you have access to this, staff or
Very
whatever
smart.
at this,
I agree.
So I see that kind of thing happening in the future.
George,
definitely.
me too.
Yeah,
I'm glad they're doing it. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, of course.
It's great to see the archaic dinosaur model of running for public office sort of get into the new age a little bit and using NFTs.
Yeah.
Let's just hope now that they can enact modern policies.
One of our mantras throughout the whole time we've been doing this, ease and flexibility and ease. That's something you brought up, I think, episode 1. And
renting versus homeownership.
Yes,
I think that's where this is going.
That's usually how we talk about it. And so in this case, I saw this article about this service, Zeus Living. They're basically like an Airbnb, but it's longer term. It's like beyond 30 days.
Okay.
And they just raised a bunch of money, $55 million for, their startup here. And they were saying that the main reason they want to do this is flexibility and ease. The whole article is plastered with the phrase flexibility and ease.
What do they do exactly?
So it's it's a longer stay than 30 days. So it's like staycation kind of homes, but it's
so they're so they want to provide a product that's more flexible and easier than owning a home.
Ownership, yeah, exactly. Yeah, or even renting it.
I think they're onto something. As we've talked about, I think that's the way of the world now. People want ease and flexibility with their money, with their living situations. Home ownership isn't for everybody like it used to be not so long ago. And I think young people today think about owning a home and their living situation much differently than they used to.
As I was reading about it, it occurred to me, what should investors or owners or operators use this knowledge for? Like this knowledge that, flexibility and ease is something that the market is seeking. What do we do about that?
Well, if you're looking to see which way the waves are flowing, I think they're flowing further and further away from long-term strapped down home ownership, and much more quickly and significantly the waters are flowing towards either non-home ownership or some sort of hybrid home ownership where you're not tying up your capital for long periods of time. I think we're going to see the 40 and 50-year mortgage very, very soon. When the 40 and 50-year mortgage come along, that's going to increase the length of time to pay out a mortgage over the life of the mortgage, which will reduce the monthly payments.
Yeah.
The cost of living is so high right now that any way you can reduce monthly payments is a big welcome thing. So the 40 or 50-year mortgage is going to reduce the monthly payments significantly, allowing more people to be able to make payments on their home. But by the way, watch the caveat. The caveat is when the 40 or 50-year mortgage comes along, the housing market's going to erupt to Mars unlike anything we've ever seen. You think the pandemic made the housing market explode? Wait till you see the 50-year mortgage product and what that does to our housing market. It's going to create housing prices unlike you've never seen.
Yeah, so
never seen.
The monthly payment will go down, but only for like a second.
Well, your monthly, for the same amount of money, your monthly payment will go down.
Yeah.
You may have to borrow more money to afford a now more expensive home.
Yeah.
But for the same amount of money, your monthly payment's going to go down.
We've often compared real estate asset classes in the past to office versus industrial
Every
versus
week we do.
Retail. Yeah, that's something we often do. One that has been coming up a lot in headlines recently is self-storage, and we haven't really touched on it that much. What are your thoughts on self-storage?
I like self-storage. It's a great asset class. Yeah, you don't need plumbing. You don't need the manpower. You can staff it with 1 or 2 people or 3 people, depending on the size of the property. and it's pretty much self-serve. I mean, I like the low maintenance of self-storage. And, George, we're a culture that is not one that values disposability. We value collectability. So we never get rid of anything. How many of you out there have a closet filled with clothes that you've purchased over the years that you don't wear, but you just also don't get rid of it? So you hoard your clothes, you hoard everything. We as a society, we hoard everything. If you go to Japan, if you go to Europe, those people repurchase new clothes like every season. Like they don't rewear last year's stuff this year. And so they're constantly in the markets buying new stuff, and they have like a few staple items and they just wear that stuff, and then next year they buy new stuff. So we don't do that. We have boxes and boxes and storage and needs for like our closets are overflowing. George, in my closet, I can't, if I were to hang up something new, if I go to the store and buy something new in my closet, and I go to hang it up, I have to like jam to the left,
starts
and to the
an
right,
avalanche.
make like this much space, and then I can hang it because I have that much space in my closet because everything is just jammed in there.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, indicative of our society as a whole. We don't get rid of anything. We save everything. We need storage for it. So not only do we need closet space in our apartments or our homes, but we need extra space off-site that maybe we don't want to pay for in the form of a larger, more expensive home when we go to buy our home, or a larger, more expensive apartment when we go to rent our apartment, but we still need the storage space.
Right.
So for $300 or $400 a month, or $200 or $100 a month, you can get different sizes of storage space, and it can be ventilated or not. It can be temperature and humidity controlled or not. It can be outdoor access, indoor access. There's all sorts of different products that are available in the storage space property world. But we need it. We need it as a society. I know I need it as an individual for my family. I'm sure you guys need it too. It's a great asset class. There's lots of demand for it. I like investing in storage assets.
Yeah.
For those reasons.
That makes sense.
We're just a fat, gluttonous, hoarding society, and we need places to put our shit.
Yeah, it makes me think. Carlin had that bit back in the 70s about, like,
what was Carlin's bit?
Yeah, he said, like, we just gather a bunch of stuff, and then you eventually save enough money to buy a house to put more stuff in. Yeah, that's the whole thing.
That's right. He goes, that's what a house is. It's a place to put your stuff.
Well, that's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff. That's all your house is. It's a pile of stuff with a cover on it.
That's what I got today. Do you have anything that you wanted to touch on? We haven't met in a few weeks, so is there anything that...
So there was something that's on my mind that I want to share with everybody this week. So the past couple of weeks I've been having the same conversation multiple times, and it dawned on me I should probably speak about it with you here today.
Yeah.
So the issue is the stock market going to crash? So what I say, George, is that I think the stock market has already crashed. I think the crash has occurred.
Really?
Yeah, and because of a feature called dispersion, we don't really see it on a daily basis. So what I mean by that is that if you look at the S&P 500, there's 2 or 3 stocks that make up the bulk of the value of the S&P.
Yeah.
Everything else, so Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, the Jagmas, whatever.
Yeah.
Those guys make up the bulk of the value in the S&P. So if they move $2 or $3 or $5, it's a significant amount for them, and that's a lot of value. So they're going to have movements of a little bit, while the smaller cap stocks that are in the S&P are going to have much larger percentage and dollar swings in their prices. And so if you look at everything else in the S&P other than those few big stocks, those have already crashed. I mean, they're down 50, 70%. Yeah, that's a crash to me. That's a crash. That's not 10 or 20%. That's not a correction. That's a crash. So I think if you look through the different components of the S&P, you'll see what I'm talking about. And this phenomenon is called dispersion. Because of dispersion, we don't really see it as obvious as what I'm saying, but I promise you it's there, and if you go look at it, you're going to see that significantly all the stocks in the S&P are down big double-digit numbers, 30, 50, 70% in some cases.
It's been like a garbage fire.
And, you look, Warren Buffett's out there shopping right now. The smart ones are out there shopping, right? Be greedy when people are fearful. That's Warren's statement. So he's being greedy right now. He's got a lot of cash. He's putting it to work at these solid companies that are just getting battered, because that's what's happening right now in this economic environment. As interest rates go up, as consumer demand starts to shift a little bit, as different things are happening with supply chain, and they're causing these companies not to have year over year, quarter over quarter increases in their earnings. They're all reporting earnings. Some are even reporting positive earnings, but they're just not more positive than they were a quarter or a year ago, so the market punishes them. So, those are pretty strong companies that can still report positive earnings and just say, hey, my supply chain's constrained. You know what's going to happen when the supply chain opens up? They're going to go to the moon, man. Yeah. So the smart people are buying those companies and those stocks right now. It's called dispersion. Check it out.
Dispersion. I'm going to check it out. All right, Peter, ready for some Q&A?
George, I'm ready, dude.
Always ready for Q&A. This is from Lyle Green.
Lyle Green. Is he one of our followers?
He is one of our followers.
Yes,
Lyle. So Lyle.
Thank you.
Lyle asks.
So there's Lyle, my mom, you, and my wife. I've got four followers.
We got a little more than four, I think, at this point. But Lyle says, I'm just starting out on multifamily ownership and operation. Do you recommend investing in a coach to avoid early mistakes, or is that just a waste of money at this stage?
No, listen, coaching is a great idea for so many people. Look, the best athletes in the world, they have coaches. The highest performers in the world in any of their crafts, they all have coaches, and more than just one coach. If you're just starting out, you need a mentor, you need a coach, probably more than one coach, who you can bounce things off of and who can give you guidance. I mean, you're going to need loan and debt guidance in this crazy debt market that we're in. You're going to need pricing and underwriting guidance. If this is your first time, Lyle, you're going to need guidance on everything. Get a coach. They're out there. Make sure it's someone who's got experience, who's been around the block. Don't seek coaching from someone who's been in the industry for a year or two, or who makes maybe an amount of money doing it that you want to aspire to be greater than. You want the best coach. You want the best people who are executing right now in your markets. You want them to be advising you. So be careful who you're seeking coaching from, but definitely get a coach or two, get a mentor, maybe intern for free or work for the biggest, baddest, best developer in your area for free for 6 months or a year, just to gain exposure, maybe some contacts. I wouldn't seek any money from it. You're gonna get plugged into all the right places, you're gonna hear all the right conversations, and it's gonna really impact your ability to do the same thing when you leave. So I recommend all that stuff, and you're smart for asking about it.
For the internship thing, or like asking to work for free, is there a way that you would go about that? Like that, you would just...
So I would say, hey George, my name's Peter, you don't know me, I know you, you're great at what you do, I'd like to work for you for free every single day for 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, if you want to hire me, great, I got a job. If you don't want to hire me, we shake hands, no harm, no foul. I'll get a lot out of the experience by working for you. And while I'm with you for these 6 months, I'm going to bust my ass, I'm going to run through walls, I'm going to take bullets, you're going to be blown away by me. So please throw me lots of challenges and problems and tasks to do while I'm with you for these 6 months, but no cost to you. What do you say? And I'd frame it like that and see what they say. I mean, you ask that question about 5 or 10 times, you're going to get a few yeses for sure.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, Peter, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks.